Hi, welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. My name is Bob Bianchi. Happy Monday. Great to be back with you, especially covering the Scott Nelson case and so many other trials and issues that we got on the burners here at the Law&Crime Network. As you know, we cover gavel to gavel. We have an update on the Epstein case. Now, you may know this case. We've discussed it before. This is an individual who I have the indictment in front of me right now, who has been charged by the federal government on multiple charges. We have our very own Rachel Stockman, the president here at the Law&Crime Network, that's going to break it down for us. Rachel, how are you? Crazy case.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we heard about the arrest this Saturday. The indictment just unsealed this morning. We've been reading through it, but let me tell you, it does not look good for Jeffrey Epstein. He's facing 2 sex trafficking charges. The feds alleging that he basically orchestrated this scheme where not only did he abuse these underage girls, he was also part of recruiting them, possibly for his friends. This happened between his mansion here in New York City and his residence in Palm Beach, stemming from the years of 2002, Bob, to 2005.
You know, Rachel, this is startling. We've discussed this case offline because knowing how prosecutors treat these cases with great zeal, this is like what prosecutors live to do. And he got that non-prosecution agreement years and years ago out there in Florida for what are really horrific crimes. And what bothers me about that non-prosecution agreement, Rachel, is that he faced both federal and state charges for what he did. There were multiple victims that were alleged back in the day with that, but there are also defendants today. In fact, I just recently got done representing one of them who may have done a bad thing with a particular singular individual, and they're going to jail in that particular case for 7 years federally, 3 years in the state, because both jurisdictions went after him. And a guy like Epstein is skating free, at least up until today.
Right, that was because of that non-prosecution agreement in Florida. But what's important about this, and the U.S. Attorney here in New York made it very clear that that only applied to the federal district in Florida. So therefore, some of the same cases that were part of the non-prosecution agreement back 10 plus years ago are being reinvestigated, being re-indicted. In fact, we just listened to a press conference about an hour ago from the Southern District and heard from an FBI agent who was in charge of this investigation. And you heard there the feds talking about how they arrested Jeffrey Epstein as he was getting off his private plane in Teterboro. One of the things that the prosecutor said is that they believe he's a major flight risk. Of course, he's very well connected. He has a lot of money. So that's something they're very concerned about and want to keep him behind bars, if the judge will allow it, until he goes to trial.
All right, look, Rachel, no better time than right now to bring in our guest, Gene Rossi, a legal analyst here at the Law&Crime Network, 30 years with the DOJ. Gene, let's go through a little bit of the physics, the math, if you will, as to how the U.S. attorneys go about doing what they do, and nobody knows better than you. This is the indictment right now. This indictment charges him with crimes that face up to 45 years. But I'm telling you how this is going to play out. They're going to go to him and they're going to say, you're going to have to take a whopping number, and he's an elderly man, or we're going to go into the grand jury and we're going to add some nice bells and whistles. For example, the enticement statute, the child pornography statute, both possession, receipt, as well as production. I can tell you that a mandatory minimum on child pornography alone is 15 years. And by the time the probation department gets adding up all the relevant conduct, Gene Rossi, this is without question a life sentence. Enticement calls for a life sentence. Thoughts?
Absolutely. And Bob, you mentioned the zeal with which prosecutors go after this type of alleged conduct. It's alleged, he's presumed innocent. But I can tell you, when I was in the U.S. Attorney's office and we had somebody allegedly like Mr. Epstein, it would be no holds barred, and they would add counts. Here's the difficulty for Mr. Epstein. The possession of child pornography is a 5-year minimum. Production, and the case law on production is very broad. You don't have to do a lot.
What?
Is 15 years. They can be consecutive.
It's still so close.
They can be consecutive.
Right. I'm sorry, Gene. I know there's a little noise in the background. I just wanted to toss to Rachel real quick. As Gene indicated, and like I said, Rachel, the 5-year just on the possession of a singular image. If there's any videotapes, each frame of a video is considered a singular image. 15 on production. Enticement is simply manipulating people under the age of 18. People, a lot of times people think, well, I can have sex at 16 or 17 because the state law says that, 16 Jersey, 17 Jersey. But if you take a picture of a person under the age of 18, you could be facing a lifetime in prison, at least with respect to his age. Rachel, how much has the media had to do with shining a light on the dirtiness of what went on there in Florida and ultimately leading to this indictment?
Absolutely. Not to pat our own backs here, but, you know, the Miami Herald, they were really the ones that brought this back to light. And during the press conference with the U.S. Attorney's Office, they even credited the reporting for pushing them to reinvestigate this case. So I think the media played an integral role in what we're seeing here with more indictments.
Gene Rossi, I got to ask, you've been around that block. I've done non-prosecution agreements on the state side, but what would lead a U.S. attorney to enter into a non-prosecution agreement in Florida when you know full well your agents and your lawyers and your staff are all there watching what's happening? How do you make any sense of this? And should that U.S. attorney be investigated?
Well, I hope my camera works okay now. Here's the thing about that non-prosecution agreement in Miami. There are 94 U.S. attorneys' offices. That agreement only applied to Miami. That is why the Southern District is able to take this case. Number two, I have never seen in my 30 years a U.S. attorney fold like a cheap suit that the U.S. attorney did. And you asked me, what were they thinking? All I can say is one of two things. They were on hallucinogenic drugs, or there is something, Bob, that needs to be investigated because it smacks of a sweetheart deal that would not apply to some of the clients that we are confronted with.
Rachel, to Gene's point, I bring this up, and I've said this so many times when I've been given an opportunity to speak before the legislature or to governors that are going to be appointing prosecutors and judges, that before you get to anything with criminal justice reform, you need to appoint the very best, most apolitical people. Now, you get through a political process. I understand it. That's how you get the job. But once you get in there, you have to stop politics. Now, this is a kind of case, though, where you don't just give a wink and a nod. This is a guy who's victimizing and continuing to victimize vulnerable young girls. What sense could it make that he would think that he would get away with this? And as you pointed out to me, he's in another position in government, isn't he? He's in
a Trump appointee. Alexander Acosta still working for the Trump administration right now. The interesting part about this indictment is that the public corruption unit, part of the Southern District, were the ones investigating it. So maybe this is a question to Gene. What does that mean? Does that mean potentially we could have some more highly connected politicians fall as well and face additional charges?
Well, Rachel, you hit the nail on the head. Go back to Governor Spitzer. When the Southern District of New York had that case originally, he was John number 9, I think. I don't think in their wildest dreams they'd have the governor of New York as John number 9. I got to tell you this right now. Every friend of Jeffrey Epstein, who was up to no good along with him, should be shaken in their boots that the Southern District of New York has this case. They should be scared to death. And what does it tell me? That the public corruption is involved? Public officials, high or low, and aides, people on the public payroll, they could be involved. Allegedly, possibly, you could have bribes. But the other thing is you have major money laundering here because his money was being wired to people who were recruiting for him, to the young women, the girls with whom he has allegedly had a physical relationship.
Yeah, Gene Rossi, just real quick before we end the segment, I'm curious, what would you offer as a prosecutor? I mean, you want to use him as a cooperating witness, but you're certainly not going to give him a get-out-of-jail-free card. Do you agree with that?
No, you know what my offer would be? You plead guilty to a 25-year indictment or plea agreement, and you hope to heck that you can provide some information that at the end of the day will allow us to go back to the judge and ask for a reduction in your sentence. But you got to eat at least 25, 30, maybe even 40 years. and hope you can cooperate to get it down to a reasonable level.
The infamous 5K, Rachel, the cooperation. I don't think it's going to get him down very far, but our very own Rachel Stockman, president here at the Law and Crime Network, thank you for your time. Great reporting, Rachel.
Thank you. The question I want to know is who could the bigger fish possibly be that Jeffrey Epstein could implicate?
Well, you know what? Maybe we'll get that judge with that magic 8-ball and ask the magic 8-ball, because I don't think we know right now. But Rachel, to your point that you mentioned before, he does hang with some seriously powerful people like the Clintons and Donald Trump and Alan Dershowitz and God knows who else.
Absolutely. So what involvement do any of them or any of these other rich businessmen have in this? Did they know about it? Did they participate in it? That's the question.
Yeah, and you know what? You don't want to be a friend of Epstein and have done nothing wrong, because, you know, guilt by association can be a damning thing. Of course, we're not saying any of those individuals have done anything wrong, but when somebody like Epstein gets arrested, you don't want people to know that you've been friends with them. Rachel, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, guys, listen, that's our first hot topic here at the Law and Crime Network. You can tell I'm already getting sweaty over here. I'm going to put some powder on. I'm going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back with more Law and Crime. Stay with us.